welcome to the Backline with Rob and Adam. My name is Adam Colley, alumnus of the Second City Main Stage.
And my name is Rob Norman. I'm author of the cool improv book, Improvising Now, a Practical Guide to Modern Improv.
Don't you get bored just saying it like a bored dude?
No, I don't.
Every time I get to intro this podcast, it's like I'm getting on a roller coaster I haven't been on, and I'm just enjoying the ride up and down, letting my voice go where it takes me, allowing my brain to not feel judgment. You know what I mean?
But didn't you judge that the intro was boring and that's why you're changing it?
Sorry, I can judge other people. Your intro was boring. Yeah. But I don't allow myself to feel judged. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know. I understand the words.
I don't understand your actions at all.
The words make sense. The syntax is right.
Which is rare for me. Rob, how are you?
I'm well. I did my first show last night. Well, not my first show, but it was my first montage. You and I performed at the Copenhagen International Improv Festival. You and I were kind of bubbling together. I felt like I could mitigate the risk of just you. And since we were living together already, it made sense to be on stage. But we were doing an assembly show last night, and it was a faculty show. And so it was all the teachers coming together to perform as one group, one collective. And I was like, well, it's 5 other people. It seems pretty safe. I really want to see my old pals again. Okay, I'm going to go do it. And I felt really good about the show. I felt really good about performing in the show. But unfortunately, for my anxiety, the show was like almost sold out, and it was in the cab space. And so I was on stage. I was like, this is fine. It's just 5 people. I'm not touching anyone. I'm not kissing anyone. It's fine. And then I looked out into the crowd, and everyone's unmasked. I just went, I basically just hotboxed, 60 people. And it's like, okay, that's something I'm going to have to think about next time I perform.
Yeah, that's it's a very strange feeling, that breathing in collective recycled air. That kind of like, I've felt this throughout my whole life, right? You go into a bar, a club, a comedy club, a fucking tight space, and you can feel like this is not fresh, but you're just like, who cares? And
I used
now
to like it.
I know. It felt like we're all in this together. We're fucking partying.
Oh, we're shoulder to shoulder. It's foggy with all of the steam and sweat. This is great. And now I'm like, dear God, get me out of here.
Yeah. I mean, God, I'm an improviser and a raver. It's like, that's all we do. We're in tight spaces. We're hanging out with people. How did it feel to be getting like all of the things, like without a montage, you kind of don't have someone editing you. You're not getting tagged out. You had all these new feelings or not new, but like fresh feelings.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of fresh feelings. Definitely came back to it, not feeling rusty, feeling like I was a bucking bronco that they've put in that little cage, and then they open the door. I'm like, I gotta get some stuff off my chest, man. I gotta do some scenes. A lot of connections in that show, like a lot of kind of coming back to ideas. It felt very dense. It was very silly show, a lot of big characters. I just need to get that out of my system. And it was interesting too, because, as we all do, you kind of suffer through the pandemic. You suffer from isolation. You suffer from not being able to do the thing that you love, and you can get down during this process. It's been really hard for a lot of people. And playing that montage, I was like, oh yeah, that's what I missed. That was the thing I had cut myself off from.
Yeah, I've done a few now. I mean, obviously the pandemic has been handled different in California than Ontario. So it feels like people here are a little more, I guess, over things and concerned less. So I was curious, what did you feel from the audience? Like, did you feel like the audience was relaxed, or were they like, oh boy?
No, I think if you're showing up to see a comedy show, then you're ready to go. I
Yeah.
didn't see anyone who was anxious. I mean, comedy is such a superfluous activity that I think if you did have anxiety, I just don't think you would show up. If you're a performer, I think it's more likely that if you're a performer that you would have anxiety than an audience member, just because we have to perform. It's our career, it's our livelihood, so we have to be there. But nobody has to come watch a comedy show.
Yeah, I think I mentioned this last week, but the idea of when I did a show recently and it was a packed house, not hearing a cough.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like that's the thing you hear in a theater, right? You hear people when everything's silent, you hear, but not hearing that. Because if I was in the audience and I heard someone cough, I'd definitely be looking around, freaking out a little bit. But I'm sure that will subside.
It's weird because I don't normally hear coughs because there's just like wall-to-wall laughs. But it's interesting to hear that you're hearing a lot of coughs while you're performing.
Yeah, because I'm listening to everything. But when you're in the audience watching me, absolutely, it's wall-to-wall laughs. Rob, so moving on to today's topic. You got back on stage. You're playing with more than one person. You're playing with a bunch of people. Ooh. This is a show where you don't decide who you're playing with. You're put on a bill, which is, I think, the way many people end up performing improv. Mm-hmm. So today I want to talk about the feeling of being on stage, the potential frustration that improvisers can feel. So, Rob, have you ever been in a scene and you're thinking, geez, I'm not really enjoying working with this person. I'm kind of feeling frustrated.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely been frustrated on stage before. Taking a step back, I would say I've never been frustrated with a stranger who I'm improvising with for the first time. No matter who I arrive to the scene with, I'm usually excited to see that person. And even if they're doing something really different or they're inexperienced, I take a lot of pleasure in that. That's always something new and exciting for me, playing with someone who doesn't maybe necessarily know all the rules. So I don't get frustrated with that. I think where my frustrations used to come from was being on a team and not being the leader of that team, having a coach or a director who hasn't clearly set out what our goals are. And so we have half a group trying to do one thing, the other half of a group trying to do another thing, and then that creates tension. And you can literally feel it in the scene as two different ways of playing are kind of tearing at the fabric of the scene itself. So those experiences aren't always fun. And it's also really hard, like, if you're doing something special, like if you're doing a special form and it doesn't work out, that hurts maybe extra. If you're doing a herald, for example, and it goes wrong, I mean, you have two choices with the herald: incredible or not great. There's no like mediocre herald. It feels like for the most part, you're on one side of the line or the other. So it can hurt.
Yeah, it kind of feels like a magic trick where either you're wowed by it or you're like, yeah, that's not anything.
Well, you have to justify that opener, right? You did your big whoosh opener, and then when it's finished, you have to be like, yeah, like we did that because we're so cool. We didn't mind that it was a little bit weird.
Right.
But if the show sucks and you do that opener, ooh, it's hard to come back from that.
Ooh, child. Yeah, and I think we know that, like, someone who is currently frustrated, they're not having fun. They're not being funny, right? You're rarely with a friend who's in a bad mood or is really tense or frustrated about life, and they're a ball to be around. So when some player on a team is frustrated, it's bringing down the team, whether they like it or not. And if one person's frustrated, that probably means something is off, which probably means other people are frustrated. So what are some of the causes? Like, why would somebody be frustrated on stage?
I think it kind of comes back to this idea of the shared mental model. We were kind of talking about that earlier, but the idea that maybe we have different goals, maybe we have different ways of playing, maybe we have different levels of ambition. Like, I know for you, working with you from the very beginning of our careers, you had an unbridled ambition. You were here to take the world by storm. And so when a rehearsal's happening, you're there 15 minutes early, half an hour early, because this is your job, right?
Yeah.
Other people may be looking at this like a hobby. And so I can only imagine young Adam Colley being there half an hour early and someone else is showing up half an hour late. And you're like, what the fuck is this
But
guy?
showing up late with like snacks or something, it's like if you would have been here on time if you didn't grab those things. And if you want to grab those things, that's fine. Just make sure you leave earlier so you can get those things and then get there on time.
I think it's funny because you're hosting this episode, but it feels like you are way more easily frustrated by things in people than I am. So a lot of my
100%.
answers are just like, yeah, it's for the most part it's fine.
Well, just because I'm hosting doesn't mean you can't ask me questions. You can't be like, hey, Adam, like, what do you think on this? Because, yeah, I think I have been extremely frustrated on stage, but as you said, like, I'm often a unique case in the way I handle my life and career. So to hear someone like you of like, well, what would get to you? Because I think you are a much more managed. You manage your emotions much better and are able to have more empathy and sympathy for situations and people. So yeah, it's just an interesting topic because stand-up writing, you can get frustrated with a few things, but usually they're about yourself, right? Your time management, your productivity, or you get frustrated with people who are not in your creative field you're not working with. They're people who reject you. So to be on an improv stage and be forced to be with other people, your frustration is usually targeted at someone or a team member or a coach or an audience. So it's like, as soon as you get into that position, that's why I wanted to talk about it. It's like, well, what do you do? Is the show ruined? Can you get yourself back on track?
Can we talk a little bit about frustration and what it is? Because I think maybe that might be helpful for us. You know, when I'm thinking about frustration, I'm thinking about being 12 years old, playing Legend of Zelda, and not being able to defeat the boss with four mouths who you have to drop bombs on. And you take that controller and you throw it on the ground. And you puff, you storm out of the room.
What a feeling. Yeah.
And so that frustration is you want to go somewhere. You want to do something. The world won't let you. You're with your partner. You're having a conversation. You're talking about your feelings. You want to get to a resolution. You can't get there. It's not working. The communication isn't working. You're frustrated. So frustration, I think, is very common when we're thinking about being in a collaborative art form. Because how can I make you or the group move to the place where I need you to go? And that is a skill that we don't talk about because it's not about setting up the who, what, where. It's not about how good your imaginary buttering of bread is. It's entirely a mental game. You have to get really good at understanding that you don't have the right to tell the group where to go. You have to kind of give up that ambition or that drive to make something happen in a scene. And then you have to get really good at accentuating what is already happening. And a strong coach or strong director telling you what the rules are or telling you as a group how to do it, telling you what the boundaries are, that's really helpful. If you don't have that, then it's all up to you to manage your own expectations of what should happen next.
Well, I mean, let's see if we can break this up into two categories. One is a team that is coached and one that is, you know, as you said, a montage, a random show that you are put on, or a team that just doesn't have a governing body. So you've got a team with a coach. Cool. The coach says, hey, everyone, here's what we're looking for. We all want this to happen. We're really looking for second beats. I want you to find a character and then immediately take them to a second beat. Okay. You're on stage. You do that, or you attempt to do that, and no one seems to be going with you. Or at least the person you're on stage with, they're not doing the thing. That would be very frustrating to me. So what do you do?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of things that you can do. I mean, first of all, in this scenario, it sounds like maybe you might be at a different skill level than other people on your team because you have managed to do these second beats quite easily, and other folks are still struggling with it. So you will require patience while other people get up to your level. If it feels like that's not happening anytime soon, you can go talk to the artistic director and say, hey, listen, I'm not trying to do anything shady here, but I am feeling a little bit frustrated because I'm struggling to do the kind of moves I want to do. Is there another team that might be a better fit for me? If that's not an option, can you talk to your coach and maybe share some of these frustrations with them? Can you be working on other things in rehearsals while other people are working on their second beats? So can you pull your coach aside and be like, hey, I feel like I understand the second beats a lot. I'm happy to do the work. I want to be a team player, but maybe there's some other notes that I can be working on while other people are working on this. And yeah, I mean, making sure that you are keeping engaged and that you're not bored. I think that would be a great way to not be frustrated in a situation like that.
Well, some of the things you're bringing up here are great tactics that I agree with. I think they happen after the show. You're not on stage dealing with this and then saying, can we pause here? I'm going to go and talk to the coach and I'll be right back. You've got a deal. So what do you think? What can you do in that situation? Because it feels like the whole the whole coding of improv is support, right? And you're one of the group, and you want to support each other, and you're gonna work this together. But it does feel like the more improvisers you talk to, it's like they believe all of that, but they also really enjoy doing kind of good work. And when there's a resistance to that, or just a clash of styles, it leads to some pretty big frustrations. And this is why you see improv teams breaking up, people leaving improv companies, people being fired. So it's like, it's not all hugs and love. So you're on stage, you have a coach, but in the moment, what are you thinking?
I'm thinking, let's go down with the ship. You may not remember this, Adam Michael Colley, but I didn't start out as a performer. Some may say I'm still not. But I started as a director, and when we started a sketch troupe, we needed a director, so I said, I will direct the show. Had very little directing experience, didn't really know what I was doing. But we as a collective just decided we're going to do sketch reviews like Second City. We're not going to wait for Second City to say you're hired. We're just going to do them ourselves. And so we insisted on a kind of bar that we were going to try and meet. That process got us pretty good at figuring out our own taste of what we like and what we don't like. When I wanted to go direct at Second City, I realized the first thing I had to do was be a performer. There was no directors that I knew that were just directing and then getting hired for Second City as a director. So it's like, oh, I better learn how to improvise. Stepping into those classes, stepping into those first shows was very frustrating because I'd spent a year and a half being on the outside, trying to make things better, telling people who I thought were really funny, it could be funnier, it could be better, it has to be tighter. Pissing people off while I did that. Then as a performer, I still have that voice in my head. So I'm in shows and I'm trying to make them how I see it in my head. And I'm trying to push everyone into places that I think the show should go. Guess what? The show never went there. I never accomplished my goal. What ended up happening is I was frustrated the entire time. I'm sure people were frustrated with me. And I looked at other people in our community who didn't give a shit about what the end product was like. And they were having a blast, and people loved working with them, and their shows were pretty good. And I went, something's got to change, man. Like, if I want this show to look like this or feel like this, there's got to be another way to do it. And so I had to take a huge step back. And now when a show goes bad, I'm not there trying to fix it. I'm there putting fuel on the fire. If it's going to go bad, let's put it all the way off the rails. Let's go all the way there. I'm not going to be the one being like, let's do some grounded work now. I'm like, no. Ding Dong the Mayor showed up? Cool. Let's do like 7 more scenes about Ding Dong the Mayor. I can't wait to see where this goes.
Yeah. I agree. And I think I only agree recently. When I say recent, I don't know, 5 years or something. But the feeling of trying to fix something that is not necessarily broken, but not the way you want it to go. It feels very much like a cartoon where you're on a boat and it's sprung a leak and they're kind of putting corks in the holes, and then another one springs up somewhere else behind you. And your whole energy is spent trying to plug these holes rather than saying, maybe this going down is going to lead to something cool underwater. Let's not be scared that it's not going my way, and let's see where we end up. Because what's the worst that's going to happen? If this is already frustrating, what's the worst that's going to happen? You get more frustrated, or you turn that frown upside down and somehow you're like, I actually used improv techniques of yes-anding and following my partner, and it led me somewhere that maybe I was just afraid to go. Because trying to fix it, guarantee you're either going to continually frustrate yourself or frustrate the audience and your partner. Because that's not a fun thing when you're doing a scene and someone is just trying to correct everything you do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think what you said was brilliant there. Instead of trying to bail out the boat that's taking on water, focus on swimming. Like, you're trying to stop the inevitable from happening. How do you think this is going to end up for you? Mm-hmm. Learn how to swim in whatever this nightmare is and enjoy that thing. And I think, touring, you and I never get to play in the way that we want to unless we're playing with each other. And that's not a bad thing. I love it. I love showing up and being like, okay, well, this style isn't how I play. Maybe this isn't my favorite way to play, but it's special now. I don't ever get to do this. So great, we're going to do 6 hours of short form games. Let's see where that goes. I don't lose anything from trying something new. You and I have that expression that we used to say to each other in our most frustrated moments in our career. It's a class. You have a problem in your show? It's a class. It's a class on dealing with people. You got fired. You got rejected. Oh, it's a class. It's actually a free workshop on rejection, and now you're going to be better for it next time. So it's a class.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, too, because just thinking about this going down with the ship, I think about, we've talked about this in audition podcasts, of the people watching, they're usually good, and especially in an improv audience. If there's someone that maybe you're nervous about them being in the audience because they're more experienced than you or whatever it might be, they're more experienced because they can see things. And if they see, wow, Rob got hit with a ton of bricks there by Rob's partner, and he just embraced it. The scene was horrible, but I could see Rob working with the scene partner, and he went for it. What a brave, powerful performer Rob is, even though the scene was terrible. The audience, the general audience, Adam's mom in attendance, may have thought, ooh, Rob's a bad improviser. But you don't get to control that. But being able to just say, hey, man, I love playing with Rob. He'll go wherever. He's not afraid. I think that is a big issue with frustration is I'm scared of what's going to happen if this doesn't go the way I've thought it's going to go or I want it to go.
Yeah, again, I just think about that that gap between how you see it going, your projection of what's going to happen, and where you are right now. And there's a big space between that gap. And the best way to fix that suffering is to eliminate this end goal. If you're a perfectionist, if you want to be seen a certain way, improv is going to be very hard for you because you can't control anything.
It makes me think of Paris syndrome. Remember that? I think this was in Blink. This is one of the Malcolm Gladwell books where in like the 1920s, the French government was like, we're going to advertise Paris specifically to the Japanese.
Yeah.
We want the Japanese to come over here. They've got money. It's like it'll be a very different culture for them, and we can advertise it like, if you've ever seen paintings of Paris in the 20s, you're like, this looks so romantic. Oh my God. And they did this, and the Japanese were like, well, fuck, we got to go to Paris. My God, look at this place. And to get to Paris in the 20s from Japan, yikes, what a travel. So they got there, and they saw homeless people, and they saw graffiti, and they saw dirt and trash, and they were like, well, I was lied to. You lied to me. You made my expectations so high for this place that anything that went wrong completely ruined me. And it ruined a lot of people in terms of their trust, their ability to get excited for things. Intense. And so this very much feels like that of like, hey, if you think you're going to step on stage with whoever and make this beautiful scene every time, and it starts to veer off course, and you get frustrated, well, then you've already lost.
Well, and if you haven't already watched this Ira Glass talk on YouTube, I don't know what it's from, but everyone in radio has heard it. But if you haven't, I would check it out, even if you're not in radio. But he talks about this gap between your taste and your ability and the anguish of that. And so you start with no taste, no ability. Then often you develop your taste, so you know what's good. And then you're looking back down being like, but I can't do it. And slowly you're chasing that taste until it meets it. It hurts. It hurts a lot. But you can't figure out, I know what's good. Why can't I do it? It's like you're a singer and you're like, I know what Beyonce sounds like, but my voice won't do it. Well, it's just time. It's just going to take time.
I told you about my fourth grade talent show.
No, you didn't.
Me and a few other guys, we were like, well, we're going to sign up and we're going to sing. And the teacher was like, okay. And so we stayed in one recess and we put on Boys to Men, Water Runs Dry, which is basically an a cappella group, or not an a cappella, like a barbershop quartet style of, and obviously they were amazing singers. And so we just played the tape and would be like, okay, you go like, oh, and I'll go like, you don't even talk anymore. And the teacher like looked up from her desk and was like, hey guys, so like, let's talk about Boys to Men. And maybe you guys try something different. And she saved us from a lot of embarrassment. But our taste was definitely higher than our ability. Like, we would have been mortified.
Yeah.
Anyway. Well, look, every bit of frustration doesn't have to lead to a catastrophe on stage. You might be frustrated for a moment. And then that moment passes and we move on and we're fine. We don't have to go down with the ship. It's not heads or tails here. So in terms of you, Rob, what are some of the things that kind of bothers me on stage? What frustrates you?
I mean, nowadays I think really the only thing that could frustrate me would be walk-ons or interruptions. And I think, we've talked about this a couple times, but especially now with the pandemic, I really have a different way of valuing stage time. If I'm going to pay for an Uber, it's going to cost me $10. I'm going to buy a drink for myself. It's going to be another $10.
$10.
$20 in the hole. Yeah, I'm $10 in the hole, $20 in the hole. And I'm going to go do a montage. well, I'm probably going to work on some things in that show. I'm going to be building a skill. I'm going to be focusing on something. I'm giving myself notes before that show. That's my gym. And if within a scene, within 30 seconds, someone comes to help me, and I don't
using
get
air quotes
to,
there.
Yeah, and I don't get to develop the thing that I'm working on or trying to get better at, I can find that frustrating. Also, when those walk-ons become contagious. So we start a scene, you and I, after 30 seconds, someone walks in. The focus is shifts from me and you to you and another person. I feel like I didn't get my fair shot. I don't feel satisfied. So in the next scene, I'm itching to get back in there because I need to get my piece. Well, I interrupt someone else's scene. It starts a chain reaction where everybody is interrupting each other because nobody has had a chance to do that kind of narrative arc. Without a catharsis within your scene, you're still hungry. So, yeah, I find that feeling quite frustrating when basically everyone is interrupting each other.
Yeah, it really feels like, Rob, you have went grocery shopping, you've chopped and prepared your food, you've cooked it, and then someone tags you out, plates it, and serves it, and we're all like, oh, Adam, thank you for this meal. You did so much hard work. And Rob's sitting there in the kitchen being like, what the fuck? Guys, so please stop taking over someone else's finished product and then serving it and claiming it as your own. I always think if you're going to walk on or tag in, the goal should be, I'm going to make the people who are already on stage have more fun than they're currently having without me. And if that's the case, or at least that's the attempt, then you're fine.
I think it's also very interesting, too, because think about the person who is tagging in. Have they played a scene already? And if they have, it creates some issues for us. So, for example, if they've played a scene already, did that scene receive a series of tag-ins? Was it a strong enough character with a strong enough driver that it initiated a bunch of tag-ins? Probably not. So it's like, oh, well, you did a scene, you struggled throughout it, and now when my scene starts and it's working well, now you're going to jump in? That doesn't seem quite fair. I did all the work and I'm punished for having some kind of successful character arc. Or the other option is you did your scene and you destroyed it, and now you're jumping into someone else's scene. It just seems like a lot. It seems like you had your shot, you succeeded, and now you're going to take someone else's scene as well too. Either way, I think it's a bad look.
Yeah. Yeah, being aware of, am I doing things that frustrate people? I mean, that's a whole other podcast, but what are the things, like, I'm going to play a bad improviser and just do all of the things, and we can walk through that at a later episode. Rob, we played for years together, probably almost like 20 years. What do I do to frustrate you on stage? Have I ever frustrated you on stage? It's okay.
No, if I'm going to be honest with you, and if I'm
Which you
being
should.
honest,
You have to be honest. It's a podcast.
I honestly can't remember. I can't remember you or Jason Deross ever frustrating me on stage. I have never been like, what are you guys doing? Because I love you. I love you both dearly. And I love playing with you. So that's a gift every single time. There's been times when I pretend I'm frustrated because it's funny. But for the most part, no. I'd say, like, if we have had any frustrations or challenges, most of them have been off stage. And even those, I think they've been mostly resolved pretty easily because you're so afraid of conflict. So
That's right. I agree.
I mean, I think maybe this is like maybe why our creative relationship, our creative trio works, is because we don't frustrate each other, because we do have similar values. You know, I would say, you know, playing with our best friend Jason Deross, like, Jason plays a little bit, well, very differently than I play, and that could frustrate someone. But I understand Jason so well. I know that look in his eye. because Jason used to be a professional snowboarder. I know when he's about to go off the half pipe and do something wild. I can see it in his face. And I'm never like, oh, well, that's not what I would do. I'm like, yo, dude, I wouldn't even know how to pull off this trick.
Yeah.
I'm going to love it if you land it. I'm also going to love it if you crash and burn. Either way, this is going to be an incredible thing to be a part of. So I can honestly say no. All right, Adam. When do I frustrate you? Is it the monologues? Is it too many monologues?
Actually, the only time I remember being frustrated was in when we were doing Mantown. But I mean, that's like being frustrated at someone when you invite them to a frat party. And it's like, hey, man, you didn't put your beer on a coaster. It's like, well, why would you expect that I would put a beer on a coaster? I think there was a few times where you would run into the front of the crowd and like just chug someone's beer and get it all over your shirt.
Oh, yeah.
And I'd be like, well, that's going to be difficult to deal with now. But really, it's if you're on a team and that team is simply a duo or 12 people, it's like, man, if the show's going well, enjoy that ride because they don't always go well. And if something's happening that your partner's doing that you're like, wow, they're taking up a lot of space or they're doing a lot of this, but the crowd's into it, don't waste your energy fighting that. Know that, hey, this is one show. And if you can, I know you want to say something so bad, Rob. You want to respond to this so bad. But the idea of, look, if that's your only show for the next 2 months, you're probably going to set yourself up for some disappointment because you want stage time. You want to have that feeling of the audience liking you. And if you want to help reduce any frustration you have, simply having another show booked alleviates that. What do you want to say?
I just think it's so funny that you never told me about this checking beer thing bother you so much.
Because you didn't do it every month. Like, it would happen every once in a while. But I do remember it happening and being like, is this the right time for this?
I thought it was fun to try and see if I could drink an entire pitcher of beer by myself.
But you couldn't.
And I couldn't.
And, no, you couldn't. But it was all over the stage.
For me. But this is so interesting because we've been friends for way too long. And you never pulled me aside and be like, hey, man, just so you know, last show when there was like a bunch of beer on the stage, it made me feel a little bit like unsafe. I felt like I was going to slip. I just wanted to give you a heads up. If you would have said it to me, I would have never done that again. Yeah,
but I don't think it bothered me that much. I think just in the moment, you're just like...
I see.
It's a chaotic show. And to see like some sort of chaos where you're like, well, what do we do with this now? So the feelings of overcoming this we talked about. Any other thoughts on overcoming this? I know the idea of like, have another show booked. So the pressure of this show needing to be the one is reduced. Really going down with the ship. What else? Anything else that we can think about?
Well, can we break down going down with the ship a bit more? Because I think it is quite helpful to maybe spend some space within this process. You know, I think a lot of suffering, the suffering comes from resistance. Let me give you an example. Okay. You and I are at a party. Right?
I like it.
And you're talking to me about something that interests you, which is Mesopotamian mythology. And me, a cool guy who loves drum and bass, I think that's boring. And you're going on, you're talking about all these ancient, pre-Iraq, pre-Iranian gods like Enlil and Enki and Ishtar, the goddess of heaven and earth, of course.
Obviously. Yeah.
Ishtar, who defeated death by passing through the seven gates.
Through the seven gates.
Of the underworld. Anyways, so you're talking to me about this stuff that I don't care about. Uh-huh. So what do? Well, I can leave the party. I can leave this conversation. It might be hard. Might create conflict by doing that. I can try and change the subject. I can try and veer it back to hockey and drum and bass. And, I want to tell you more about a TV show I like. That's going to create a lot of displeasure. One thing that I love to do is just to flip that switch in my brain and just do the opposite and go, How much can I get you to tell me about this subject? How many questions can I ask? How much time can we spend doing this? Like, that process changes everything for me. And then suddenly you giving me this lecture about Mesopotamian mythology, it's actually kind of fun. It becomes a game for me. I get to live in this world. And often by changing that mindset, sometimes you actually become very interested in the thing that person's talking about. So again, instead of trying to fix it or change it, what happens if we go the other way and we get rid of all of the resistance and we try and push the thing that we don't like more? I think about this a lot when I'm on the streetcar or subway and someone's playing music without headphones. It's so frustrating, right? But you know what I think is so funny? This is my ultimate revenge. Do you know what I like to do? Smile and bob my head to the music. And it's incredible because the person who's being annoying is like, you're not supposed to behave this way. You're not supposed to like the music I'm playing loudly. I recognize on some level I'm inconveniencing you. And by you like joining me in this music, it makes me feel a little bit weird. And then all of a sudden I'm laughing to myself that they feel weird that I'm participating in this annoying thing that they're doing. And so it changes the power dynamics of this whole thing. If I'm on stage and you won't let me talk, well, instead of me trying to get in there, I'm just going to encourage you to do more of a monologue. Tell me more.
Yeah. That is like, when done to someone you love, that is one of the funniest things for someone to kind of, because it's that moment where the person who's been talking forever recognizes like, holy shit, I've just been talking at this person forever. And usually the crowd is into it too, because they're like, oh, this guy's, I love that. That's very funny.
Sure.
Yeah, I think we learned this very early on in our improv career of like mistakes are gifts. And if the entire player is just nonstop mistakes or things that, frustrate you, it's like, if we can just switch our mindset to these are gifts, then all of a sudden it becomes a fun improv challenge. I'm not working against this person. I'm with them. I'm on your team. God, this is difficult. Let's see if we can figure this out together. Now we're playing multiplayer Zelda. I don't even think that's a thing. But we're both working to defeat this boss. And all that took was a simple mind shift. Cool.
Yeah. And some of these issues are interpersonal. Like, I was on a team for many years where I would do all the edits because I had that director's mind. I would be in charge of editing everything and moving things along. And I was frustrated because I was in charge of this role. And I was basically setting up scenes so other people could play within them. And one of the things that really helped me was I just didn't edit anymore. And I made the decision that if it was going to be one long scene because no one else could edit, then it's going to be one long scene. And the first week I did that, the show was bad. And then the next week the show was bad. And then the show started to get better because other people started filling in the role that I wasn't doing anymore. And then it also allowed me to do stuff like play characters, say jokes, have fun. So if you find yourself frustrated because you're stuck in one role, you are not obligated to play it. You do not have to edit. You do not have to start scenes. You do not have to bring the punchline. You don't have to do anything.
It's an unnecessary burden of responsibility when you get into that mindset of like, oh, I got to do a show tonight. Well, here we go. I guess I'm hosting. I guess I'm doing this because I know people want me to do it, or no one else steps up. There's a lot of things that can frustrate people. Let's say you're heading into a show. You're not even on stage yet. You're backstage. You're seeing who's in the show, and there's just someone that, even socially, you don't really get along with. But I got to be on stage with you. I may have to like share laughs and be physical and yes and you. But I know as soon as we step off stage, we actually don't like each other very much. Any thoughts on like how do you get over that? How do you deal with someone that you're frustrated with in a non-improv sense, and then have to step on stage with them?
Well, I mean, I think there's many reasons to be frustrated with someone. It could be because they don't respect your boundaries. So if that's the case, then you have an interpersonal dynamic issue. But there's this other part where you're frustrated just because of the way your personalities gel.
Mm-hmm.
Like for example, if you're the oldest of 5 kids, you're going to have a tough time interacting with me, the youngest of 3 kids, because your sense of what should happen, responsibility, is very different than what I think should happen in a space. I struggle a little bit to connect with people who are very rule-oriented, very procedure-oriented.
Is that me?
And so, no, because you...
Oh, okay, good.
No, you're not procedure-oriented. You're etiquette-oriented. You're justice-focused.
Mm.
So you're
That's
like,
cool.
oh no, my pad thai was cold. I better call the head office. That's like your energy, which doesn't bother me at all.
Is
but
Mr.
if,
Thai
if
there?
you were, if you were someone who was like really focused on like, oh, actually in the scene we have to do it this way because those are the rules, I would be like,
right,
ooh, that's weird energy. So dealing with those people, I just feel like you just have to give them space. Like if you want them to respect your boundaries, you have to respect their boundaries. You have to respect their needs. And even though it's frustrating, even though you might not want to do got your back and do the zip zap zop warm up or whatever, just do the warm up. And you are paying into a bank account that hopefully you can withdraw when you try and chug an entire pitcher of beer. Hopefully your friend loves you enough to be like, okay, you know what? He's doing this annoying thing, but actually I was annoying last week and he handled it so well. I think that's important. And I would also just come back to the idea that this is a free class. Like dealing with these people, dealing with different kinds of people, you will have to do that throughout your entire career. You know, there was a long stretch in Second City's history, and you and I know this firsthand, that producers would purposely put people who didn't get along together in casts because they believed that conflict made better shows. I hope we still don't do that. But that's a story that we've heard numerous times where it's like, ooh, so this person's in there to stir the pot. And you're like, this is not Jerry Springer. This is an ensemble. So, and you and I know in one of our favorite shows, there was 2 cast members who did not get along with each other. And they created brilliant things together. Mm-hmm. Some of my favorite scenes they were in together. And they were very charged scenes. There was a lot of anger in those scenes, but they used it for the art form. So just because you're someone who is unpleasant or you don't connect with, doesn't mean that your art is going to be bad. It may benefit from that contrast or that conflict.
Yeah, it's an ongoing struggle, and it's very interesting the way I think it used to be encouraged to hide any of these feelings and, you know, just glaze everything with, well, we gotta support, we gotta yes, and it's improv is this way. But I think it's good to talk about some of the realities of, yeah, man, sometimes I get pissed off on stage. Yeah, I'm making up beautiful art and yes-anding, but it's my 6th show this week, and I don't have time for this anymore. A lot of feelings can come up, but I think learning how to manage them, learning how to accept some of them, I think is great. And knowing that, hey, just because you're frustrated right now does not mean your whole show is ruined, does not mean your whole scene is ruined. So hopefully there's some techniques here and some things that you can think about to turn that scene upside down.
Yeah, and I think what you just kind of said is really important, that all relationships are always going to go through a cycle of 2 things, which is rupture and then also repair. That's a normal part of that process. So as long as you can acknowledge that a rupture has happened, then you're fine. As long as you can make an effort to repair it, you're fine. Very few conflicts that have happened in the Toronto improv community are a result of people acknowledging a rupture and making an effort to repair it, and then being unable to repair it. Either you're skipping the rupture, it's fine. That pitcher of beer thing, it didn't bother me. I'll just bring it up apparently 10 years later on a podcast. The other piece is the repair piece, which is the part where it's like, hey, this bothered me. Can we make it right? And I guess also, too, if you don't acknowledge the rupture, you can never have the repair. So getting angry, expressing how you feel in a calm way that isn't yelling, is an opportunity to fix a thing and move forward. And maybe that person who you think is unpleasant or cruel to you is actually just a person who is misunderstood, who you're not connecting on, and you just need to make a little bit more effort to connect those wires. Maybe.
Yep. Absolutely. And it feels like, hey, if you have a situation, a show, a team, a person that actually makes your stage presence uncomfortable, like your time on stage not a good time, you definitely don't have to do that show and try and suffer through it. Your mental health is way more important than like building some improv skill. So some light feelings of frustration, some things that you can manage, great. Some things where you're feeling like this just actually isn't fun for me anymore. Please find a situation that makes you much more happy and make improv enjoyable, not a burden.
Quitting
Robbie.
rocks, man. Quitting is so fun. It's the best thing. Quit your improv troupe. Quit your residential company. It feels wicked to do it. One of the best flavors in the world.
A mass exodus just happened this week from the improv community based on Rob Norman's plea to just quit.
Get out of here! But like,
and then
if you
Rob
quit,
applies for
there
all
will
those
be
jobs.
something else for you.
Yeah.
There's always going to be something else for you. So just quit now. You'll find something better.
What do you think? What are the things that frustrate you on stage? We want to hear it. And how do you handle it? Reach out to us at The Backline Pod on Facebook and Twitter, and at The Backline Podcast on Instagram. Rob, before we head out, anything cool on stage, off stage that you were thinking about right now?
Yeah. I mean, I think last week we were talking a little bit about Ukraine. Man, it keeps hitting me, man. I'm teaching this class. It's an online class. One of the students is in Ukraine right now. He can't leave.
Wow.
So he's taking a writing class.
Wow.
Mind-blowing. I reached out to my friend Simon, who is doing these trips all throughout Ukraine, dropping off supplies. And I was like, yo, I know there's a lot of people here who would love to donate or help out in some way. And he was really cool. He was like, actually, we got too much stuff. We got too much money. It's not going to help us. But there's a lot of organizations that could. And I felt a little bit weird about just like throwing money at a big organization where I don't exactly know where that money is going. So I have another option for us. An improviser I've been following on Facebook in Ukraine. He is part of the Territorial Defense Force. He's been posting these pictures of his everyday life about what it's like. And one of the things that he looks forward to the most is food, the food that shows up. And so it's provided by the city and people in the city. And one of the providers is this company called Food versus Marketing. And they create these little box lunches for soldiers. And so if you're looking to donate somewhere, I know some people have been renting out Airbnbs in Ukraine and then not going, which is a really kind thing to do. Another option would be reaching out to fvsm.net and donating to their company. They're feeding soldiers, keeping people well fed while they try to defend their livelihood. So an option for people who are looking to help.
That's great. I love that. And let's hope that things get better in Ukraine very soon. And if you're able to help, please do. This podcast is brought to you by the Sonar Network. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and hit that bell. If you can rate and review us, you'll help other improvisers find us. And Robbie, we will see you next week.
I'll be trying to pull you through, you just gotta be strong. Cause I don't wanna lose you now. I'm looking right at the other half of me. The vacancy that's out of my heart is a space and now you're home. Show me how to fight for now. And I'll tell you, baby, it was easy coming back here to you once I figured it out. You were right here all along. Cause it's like you're my mirror staring back at me. I couldn't get any bigger with anyone else beside me. And now it's clear as this promise that we're making two reflections into one. Cause it's like you're my mirror staring back at me, staring back at me. Yesterday's history, tomorrow's a mystery. I can see you looking back at me. Keep your eyes on me, baby, keep your eyes on me. Cause it's like you're my mirror staring back at me. I couldn't get any bigger with anyone else beside me. And now it's clear as this promise that we're making two reflections into one. Cause it's like you're my mirror staring back at me, staring back at me.